Ciao ragazzi, this is Katie Portanova, and you're listening to Florence and Me. I'm a lover of stories and all things Italian, and I'm going to bring you all that in this podcast. My intention is to inspire you to step out of your comfort zone and explore life and travel the world. Join me as I tell you my story and many others about Italy and my love, Florence. Andiamo! Hello, everybody. We are back with Florence and Me. We've got Giulia is back, and we are talking about today the Mediterranean diet because food is life. Giulia, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here as always. Hello. And food is definitely life. And when it comes to Italy, I think people live to eat instead of eat to live.
Yeah. And I'd like us to kind of go back to childhood, I guess. Let's talk about like what we both come from Italian descent. And you lived in Italy as a child. I unfortunately did not. I wish I did. But I still lived in Italy, so there's nothing wrong with that. So let's I'll talk first. So when I grew up with my grandmother, she was born in Emilia Romagna during the war in the 1930s. She was brought to live in London during the war by my great grandmother, and then met my grandfather, who's American, and then as we go, like they moved to the States. And so my grandmother grew up in a time that was deprived with food. Like, so she was like, scarcity was always on her mind. So when I was growing up, I remember my grandmother always giving me a lot of food. And always, I don't know, I'm sure your grandparents are the same, but always giving me pasta. Like pasta was my staple in childhood. I had I don't have any specific recipes my Nana would make with pasta, but I just remember her always making me pasta. She loved making this tortellini soup with spinach and tomatoes. She loved making pasta from scratch. So when she passed last year, I actually went through all my pictures and I have so many times that we made tagliatelle together, we made ravioli, we made tons of pasta together. So I always had pasta on my mind. And I always, as I got older and I was still a very, thin child, like I ate a lot of pasta. And then at a certain point, I remember my grandmother saying to me, my Nana saying to me, like, I don't know if you should be eating all that pasta. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, this is what you put inside, like you ingrain this in me. But yeah, so my childhood was quite simple when it came to like food. It was because my grandmother grew up in a time of scarcity and then came to America, and America's like, whoa, like everyone was like, you're moving to America. My Nana would tell me lots of stories about her father being like, no, you need to go to America, like go to America because there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of food. So my grandmother didn't really carry on the traditions that I wish she did from my great grandmother and my great grandparents because she was kind of assimilated into American culture. And to this day, my aunts would say to me, like, they're jealous because I learned Italian because my grandmother never taught them Italian because of my grandfather, because he always thought she was talking about him. He was very jealous. So because he didn't understand Italian. But yeah, so that's my, childhood with thinking of the Mediterranean diet. Actually, I didn't know it was a Mediterranean diet, pasta. It was just like pasta, it's Italian, So.
It's so
like, yeah, it's good. I mean, if you put butter on it, you put cheese. Yeah, I can think back to one dish I would always make in high school. I would always make this pasta, very simple pasta, and I'd make it with, I put butter on it. And I thought, because again, I was not given like tools from my grandmother because she didn't really have any to give. So I would put on the pasta like basil, dried basil, oregano, and salt, I think maybe, and just well, salt in the water. But that was it. Like butter, cheese, oregano, and basil. And I'm like, it's Italian. And I think back to that, I'm like, wow, why? How did I eat that? I mean, it was good at the time, but still, like that's what I knew. I thought, okay, I'll put Italian spices on my pasta, and it'll be more Italian instead of just like a red sauce or butter. I'll just add that to it. So,
I
yeah.
love it.
So that was my childhood, at least in the States. So tell me a little bit about your childhood, because I don't think we ever talked about this, to be honest.
No, I don't think so either. Before I go into that, I have
Yeah.
a question for you. The pasta that you guys did have, were there specific shapes that you ate frequently, or that you favored more as
As
a
a
child?
child, I loved, and this is funny because when I told Stefano this, he thought it was really weird. I love the conchiglie, the shells. I'd always
Oh
want
yeah.
my mom to get the shells because what was cool about the shells is that the butter would get inside the shells and it would just taste so damn good. And again, at this time it was just like butter I used. I never used olive oil. I never used any of that. Um, but
Mm,
shells, and I would always a good spaghetti I'd always have as a child. Yeah. Yeah.
nice. That's actually really cool. So for me growing up, it was, I mean, my mom Italian, my grandparents speak Italian, and they've kept a lot of that tradition. And being from Lucca, they're very close to the sea as well. So there was a good mix of, seafood and kind of a lot of red meat. I think that's very typical of Tuscan food, is that everything has red meat in it. And so there were lots and lots of pasta dishes as well. And it was mostly spaghetti, tagliatelle, sometimes the tortellini in brodo as well, the broth with the tortellini. And my grandparents also, and my mom loved to make pasta themselves. So it was also a staple for me growing up, But when I was very young, I remember because I struggled to get the spaghetti on
Uh-huh.
to the fork. So my grandmother would always cut it up for me so I could eat it with
Mm.
a spoon. And I never really liked spaghetti so much. So as I got older, I just kept doing that to the point where my grandmother would complain. She's like, you're not a child anymore. Why are you eating like
Oh my
this?
gosh, you were still cutting up the spaghetti?
I still do it to this day. I'm in my 30s and I still cut up the
Oh my
pasta.
God. Is that a good habit that you created as a child then? Yeah. Just easier to eat. I agree. Yeah.
Just, yeah, exactly. And she would always make a joke that because I love rice, so she never really, or my mom as well, they never really made rice very often, but I absolutely love it. And I prefer it to pasta, but the staple was pasta. So whatever we did, there was a pasta dish and then, some or other kind
Mhm.
of second. And the pasta was usually spaghetti with ragu, so like a meat sauce that has a tomato base, like
Mm.
a bolognese
Yeah.
style. And then otherwise it was lasagna or pasta al forno, which is basically the
Yeah.
same as lasagna. And I'd always want the lasagna instead of the spaghetti. So, that was always kind of a treat. And the second was always two or three vegetables, and then usually potatoes and some kind of meat, whether it was like involtini. So involtini is when you take the like little minute steak type things and then you wrap them up and you stick a toothpick through it and then you cook
Mm.
them in a sauce. And then she made panate fritto a lot, which was mostly chicken that she used. And that's just breaded chicken
Yeah.
and fried, which is I mean, fried chicken, everybody loves
Did you?
that. And those were
Yeah.
the
I was gonna
staples.
ask, sorry, did you always, were these meals that you had like mostly on the weekends, or would you have this like every night
Um, it was pretty
as a child?
much, I'd say probably like four times a week. I was at my grandparents'
Mm-hmm.
a lot, so they eat traditionally, well, as close to traditional Tuscan as you can in
Okay.
South Africa, I suppose. So there were also cold meats. Like my grandfather, he loves to make his own cold
Oh,
meats. He would make his own grappa, so there was a lot of that. There was always wine on the
uh-huh.
table. But when my mom cooked, she would often make Italian food, but she really had a lot of influence from South Africa. So sometimes it would be, like a roast chicken with roasted potatoes and peas that are like drenched in
Mm-hmm.
butter. And those memories are very fond. I have very fond memories of that, but they weren't
Sure.
common. It definitely wasn't the norm. Um, it was more at my grandparents' house and how they ate, and pasta could even be 5 times a week,
Sure. Yeah.
always pasta. And occasionally my grandmother would make
Uh-huh.
pesto, and that was definitely a springtime, summertime thing. It wasn't all year because they would grow
Yeah.
their own basil. So they like to grow their own food as well, which is something they
Uh-huh.
brought over. Um, just thinking back, sorry, Luna, again. Thinking back, my grandmother, she grew up in the
Okay.
countryside,
Yeah.
of Lucca. So she's a country girl, comes from a family of 13
Oh,
children, had
yeah.
to cook for them because she was the seventh child. So, a very long history of having to cook for big families and make do with what you have. Because again, she was also born, during
Mm-hmm.
the war, and they lived in post-war Italy. So they tell stories of the sugar rations and the
Oh,
bread
yeah.
rations and all
Uh,
sorts of interesting
yeah.
stuff like that. Um, whereas my grandfather, he's a single child and grew up
Huh.
in the city, completely different to my grandmother. So she taught him how to forage and grow food and take care of chickens
Oh.
and all of that. And interestingly enough, as they've gotten older, she cares less about that and he cares more about it. She's like, I'm done. I've been doing this my whole
Uh,
life. I'm done. I just do
yeah.
the cooking.
Yeah.
But my great grandmother on my grandfather's side, she could cook very
Mm.
well. She was quite an accomplished cook, and obviously she had a lot more time to focus on the quality of the
Mm-hmm.
food than what in my grandmother's side of the family had to focus on. And so there was always this understanding of where the food came from. It was never, oh, just, this is what Nonna makes and that's that. They would take us to the butcher and these kinds of places to pick up the food. You see the animals, you meet them, you see how food is grown. So there was always that life cycle aspect to eating at their house. So a plate of pasta was never just a plate of pasta. It was the hours that went into making the pasta, making the sauce, sourcing the eggs,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It was always a story, and a sense of
Yeah.
community. So I guess it's where my love of cooking
Yeah.
came
I
from.
believe it.
I
It's
would
like
just say, sorry, rambled on a
it's
bit there.
ingrained in you. It's definitely ingrained in you. And what's interesting is the other thing that as you were talking about this, I was thinking, I'm like, duh. My nana, when they lived in this house, about 40 minutes away from where I am now, for 30 some years, and my nana was an avid gardener. Like she loved to plant tomatoes, all types of vegetables that she could grow. So there was always like basil, fresh basil, there's always tomatoes. There was always something that she was putting in a dish or she was giving to us as a child. Um, she wasn't I mean, it's interesting because she wasn't like, I think it's something you take on from a relative or from a mother. But I don't know how my great grandmother was with gardening, but I know they had a garden because I saw it. Because when I visited there in 2007, I saw the garden that's still there. Um, but
Wow.
but my grandmother, like my nana didn't have a lot of no understanding of how to do it. She just did it. So she planted the seeds and they would just grow. Like she
Mhm.
didn't do any like, fertilizer or anything like adding to it. So when she moved to this retirement community that you had to get permits to get to put a garden in or anything, obviously she didn't do that. She just did it. And she would grow still a ton of basil, a ton of tomatoes, a ton of rosemary. Like she had all the spices. And like I remember going over there, when she was more, mobile, and like we were having coffee and cookies and stuff, and she like, okay, what do you want for my garden? Like, so I would always take something because obviously nobody else in my family really cooked, so it was mostly for her. And when she moved out of that
Mhm.
house to go to assisted living, my mom found so many frozen tomatoes, basil, and this all came from her scarcity concept of being in war torn Italy, because like you were saying, like they
Yeah.
had not a lot of bread. They ate a lot of rice. Like my great grandmother worked in rice fields outside of Milan during the war. Like that's, and she left her 4 kids alone in Emilia Romagna, and she would travel there. I don't know how often, but so I remember her emptying the fridge, going like, who knows how long these tomatoes have been sitting here, because she doesn't put dates on things. She would just cut them up and throw them in the freezer, and just in case she needed them, she'd take them out. So I loved gardening then when I moved to Italy, because as much as I didn't grow, um I didn't have the ability to grow like tomatoes and all these other things because I had pots. I didn't have actual earth. But I still to this day look back at my pictures of all my flowers because I love flowers. So I would have a terrace of
Mhm.
flowers, which I don't know if you ever visited that apartment where I had it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean those types of habits we take on as children and we see our grandparents do, they're so important as we age, because we think back like, well, where did this come from? Like, oh yeah, that's right, Nana told me that you have to do XYZ to do this, or your grandma parents told you like, okay, this is how you make ragu, okay, this is what you do, and blah blah, and you remember. Maybe you don't remember every single step, right, but you have that ingrained in you, and that's why you're so an avid like gardener, and you love to grow your own food, and that's what you were doing in South Africa, right, before you moved to
Yeah.
to Italy. So yeah. um
Uh, it's definitely that kind of story. My mom's also an avid gardener, and it was lovely to have the different perspectives. My grandmother also that very, war torn. We don't have a lot. Preserve
mhm,
everything. Um, if you get something at a deal, or someone's going to throw out a box of tomatoes, you get it. You make sauce out of it, and you put it up in the freezer or the fridge or
mhm,
something. And whereas my mom, she had a lot of that, or she still does. She has a lot of that approach to things, but with a little bit less of the, okay, war torn, we don't have a lot of food. So she introduced the idea of growing
mhm,
flowers, or she
mhm,
loves roses. And I remember my mom always had rose bushes in the
mhm.
garden,
Wow.
and she would just painstakingly take care of these roses and love them. And there was always like a fish pond. It made her so incredibly
Yeah.
happy. And yeah, that happiness kind of translated to me as well. When I'm cooking, growing stuff, and just getting my
Yeah.
hands dirty, that's when I'm the
Yeah.
happiest. Uh, and that's also when I feel connected to my mom and my
Mhm.
grandparents. And when I think about them, it's kind of like a
Yeah.
bittersweet moment. It's like my grandparents are a bit older now, and they're in their late
Mhm.
80s, so it's only a matter of
Yeah.
time. And it's just beautiful to know that I have so many skills, and that they've taught me, that I've been able to build on, and that I've also got a husband who has the same kind of approach to things, and just continuing that
Yeah.
tradition. And I would say it's true for a lot of people with Italian
Yeah,
families. You know, food is really a big highlight.
I totally agree.
And I think you ask any Italian family, it's going to be
Mhm.
a huge part of how they connect
Yeah,
with each
I
other.
totally agree. And that's exact. I was just gonna mirror back what you just said is about growing even flowers or anything. Like 2 years ago, not this past summer, but 2 years ago, I had this massive garden on my patio. Okay, I don't have a lot of earth, but I had a huge garden. Stefano set up a whole irrigation system, and like my flowers were like blooming like crazy. I had tomatoes. I think I tried to grow some zucchini. But but that feeling of growing something, and I know you agree with me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you grow something and you walk outside the next morning and see that ripe tomato, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you feel that connection, like you were just saying, with your grandparents, with your mother. And you're like, oh my God, so I can do this. Like I did this. This is amazing. Um, so
Exactly.
yeah, I think that this is why I love when we talk about these things, because it's so like amazingly, um, it just kind of gets you at the core of like, this is what I'm doing and I love doing it. And even if it's something that takes on a little bit more time, it's so helpful. It's so helpful for our life, for our health. And it just, again, creates that community and that culture, like between family. Yeah.
Exactly that. And obviously there's, that's definitely on the, let's say, immediate sort of aspect of it. But for me, it also makes me feel very connected just to, like, it's going to sound very cheesy, but to like the actual
Yeah.
earth. It makes me feel connected to the rest of the planet and helps me understand how I fit into this
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. Because I think obviously with the cities and all of that we've created as humans, it's easy to feel disconnected and not part of things, like nature is over there and I'm
Sure.
here. But being in the garden and seeing what it takes to grow tomato, to grow zucchini, when I go to the shop, I appreciate why it costs what it
Mm-hmm.
costs. It's not just this thing where you throw seeds on the ground and, oh, okay, now I've got zucchini. It's you got to nurture it, you take care of it for months
Totally.
before it actually fruits. And I think it really humbles a person to go through that experience, even if it's not something
Mm-hmm.
you love. Just being a part of it and being around people who really appreciate it and show you the
Yeah.
right way, it can humble you as a person. And I think I'm certainly less critical of what's available, and blemishes on fruits and things like that just don't
No.
bother me because I know that it's really difficult to actually get that
Mm-hmm.
right, in an organic way. Obviously, if you're spraying it and doing all the
It's
stuff,
different.
eventually you'll just grow
Sure.
something. But yeah, and speaking of the
Yeah.
Mediterranean diet, understanding it from that
Mm-hmm.
base point really helps you appreciate why it's so important for people in Italy to share their food and for you to experience what they've created for you. Because it's not just about making a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful plate, it's about the whole
Totally.
ecosystem. Um, and that's certainly what my childhood taught me about the Mediterranean cuisine. It's use what you have, use it well, and you don't have to hold back. You can just put all the flavor into it. So it's really about efficiency and effectiveness. It's like the
Totally.
two that come together. It's
And I don't
interesting.
think I understood that until I actually lived in Italy. Like the simplicity of just like going to your neighborhood fruttivendolo and the open air market and just
Yeah.
say, okay, Eugenio, what do you have today that's fresh? Or what do you have today you know, that's really good? Because, I would trust him and be like, okay, the zucchini is this is really good. And he'd always give me like some sort of inkling that like, okay, this took a long time to like make right. Like, I work really hard on this stuff. And I hope you enjoy
Mm.
it. Like basically, like here is my heart to your heart. I hope you enjoy this. And it was always very I always loved going. I only went to him. There was tons of fruttivendolo at my open air market, but that was the only guy that I would always go to because he welcomed me with such like ease and like I just loved his energy. And he would call me Chicagese. So because I was from Chicago, Chicagese, Chicagese. And he would say, I'm like, oh, Eugenio. I don't think he ever really knew my real name. Um, but it's fine. I got my fresh veggies and it was great. Um, but yeah, let's talk about like because I know you lived in Italy with your mother at a younger age. Like, what was that like? Because you were in the Mediterranean diet for sure. Like that's all you guys did. You probably went to Fruttivendolo, you went to like the probably the fresh meat, like the butcher. I don't know. So tell me about that.
Okay, cool. So the first time I was in Italy, I with my grandparents before I lived here
Okay.
with my mom, and that was my first immersion into other
Okay.
Italians. So in South Africa, there's a big Italian community. So there is Italian club, and you do get exposed to other Italian food, but obviously it's still got that um, South Africanness about it because it's the ingredients
Sure.
that you find. And so when I came with my grandparents, I was meeting my grandmother's family for the first time. And, all of her like 10 sisters, all the ones that were
How old were
alive at the
you?
time. It was like seven sisters. I was
Okay.
about
Okay.
11. And this is going to sound really strange, but it helped me understand how well my grandmother cooks because I could not believe how terrible the food was that her sisters made. I was like, what? How did you come from the
Really?
same
They
house?
weren't good cooks? Her sisters at all?
No, they were
Okay. Yeah.
mediocre
Okay.
at best. And I mean the one that I absolutely fell in love with, Tia Mariella, like she just didn't even try. She was like, no, I'm gonna go to this other lady who makes the food and then bring it.
At least she was honest, right? You know, I'm not even gonna try.
So I think her stove was
Ah,
ornamental, to
yeah,
be
she just
honest.
stored her sweaters or something. Yeah.
um, so it was interesting, and I think it's because my grandmother used to cook for most of them, so they never really
Practiced.
learned to
Yeah.
cook. And when they all married off, I don't know, it was a different
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. I mean, not that I wouldn't say that they cooked super badly. It's still good
Mm-hmm.
food. You get a nice plate
Yeah.
of pasta, and you're like, this is enjoyable. But I, with my grandmother, you can really taste the love that she puts into it, and she actually loves to cook and make food for people. So I was very spoiled by that aspect. And but the other side of it, what really surprised me is like the amount of
Mm,
fruit that's actually in the
yeah.
Mediterranean diet. Like the watermelon, the melone, there's so many different types of pears, the cherries. I ate real cherries for the
Wow.
first time. My mind was blown. I ate this huge bowl of cherries because I was like, this is amazing. Blueberries, and like, I never got to eat that kind of
Yeah.
stuff growing up, and it's available now in South Africa, but it's quite pricey because it just doesn't grow in that climate
Sure.
very easily. And so there was this fruit aspect and like people eating fruit after
Uh-huh.
dinner, and the whole idea of
Oh yeah.
Miranda, you have a little snack in between meals. I was like, what? Mind blown. Like, I can eat
Mm-hmm.
sweet stuff. That's
Yeah.
amazing. um,
I'm gonna piggyback off of that because I think there's that when I was a nanny in 2007 for this family, that's something that I picked up on a lot because they had fruit after every meal. It wasn't cookies, it wasn't chocolate, it was fruit. They'd cut up apples or they have
yeah,
pears, they have something, and the kids would always eat the fruit. So I was like, what is this? Like I don't interesting how they did that. And then the other thing, I don't know if this happened, I was going to ask you like did your grandparents or when you were living in Italy at that time, I obviously at 11, I don't know if you ate this, but the placement of where the salad would go. Because
yeah.
for now what I forget now is you remind me because I forget when I was living in Italy, Was the salad before or after the secondo? Was it after?
Um, for my
Yeah.
in my family, it was
Okay.
before.
Cause then okay, cause I'm trying to remember because here it's you always get the salad before you get your main meal. Like if you order a super salad in the States, you get the super salad first. But
Oh,
I wonder,
that's how the
yeah, and
Swiss do
I
it.
exactly. So I think from what I remember when I was a nanny in this family, I think we always got the salad after because it helped digest. I don't know.
So weird.
I don't know if that's correct. I don't know, but I remember going.
It
I'm
could
like,
be.
wait, because I was thinking about like this is wrong. We should have the salad first. But that's how they served it in the family. Okay, this is when I lived in this family, because they had people that served us. Anyway, tangent. Continue. So what kind of like other types of foods did you eat as we if we want to move to when you lived with your mother and you were what 18 or something? What when how old were you when you moved with your mother?
Um, okay, so the first time I
Yeah.
lived with my mom, I was 12 to
Okay.
13, and we lived in the center of Florence. I first lived in
Uh-huh.
Fucecchio, which is about an hour or so outside
Okay.
of Florence, and then we moved to the city
Okay.
center of Florence, and then we started going to the fresh food
Mm-hmm.
markets, and there was a lot more cold meats introduced, and a lot more
Uh,
sandwiches, like way more
yeah.
sandwiches than I could really shake a stick at,
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. Um, but there was also the introduction more seafood, so things like pepata, where you have with
Mm,
mussels
it's
in a
my
pepper sauce
favorite.
with white bun.
So
It's so
good.
delicious and it's ridiculously
So
easy to
easy.
make,
It's so good and delicious.
right? And then I started trying different things like the prosciutto
Mm,
melone, so Parma ham with the
mm-hmm.
melon. Mine was blown. I was like,
I
how does this
know.
work? Why does meat and
I
fruit
love
work
that.
together? And and then pizza. Pizza was also different. So the way that my grandmother makes it, my mom used to make
Mm-hmm.
it very similarly, which was more pizza a
Uh-huh.
teglia. So it's a bit thicker, a kind of a bit more
Mm-hmm.
bready than it is the flat pizza or the Napolitano style pizza that
Uh-huh.
everybody loves. It was the introduction of pizza, and I started eating pizza
Uh-huh.
more often. Like once a week, I got to eat pizza. It's like that was not a thing in
Okay.
South Africa. And going to the fresh food markets, my mom would always take me to get fish from the people at the fresh food market, and we always walk into the door and then be
Yeah.
blasted with that intense
Oh
fish
my
smell.
gosh. Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, what is
Oh
this?
my God. It's amazing.
um, and it's also when I first started to really cook, because I always helped my mom in the kitchen. I always helped my grandmother, but then this was the time that I started to actually cook
Mm,
on my own, because my mom was working when I came home from school. And so when I got home from school, I would make something for myself. And then I got to just try different things. Like I remember trying
mm-hmm.
sage, and I was like, this is amazing. I need more sage in my life. And the simple pasta dishes like the
Oh,
burro salvia,
such
butter
my
and
my favorite
sage,
too.
a little bit of
So good.
parmesan.
So good. Simple, so
So
good.
good, right? Um, and the fact that I didn't have to eat spaghetti, I think, was one of the things that stood out for me, that I could
Yeah.
have other kinds of pastas, like pasta filled with
Mm.
potato. A big, I was like, what? A starch on starch? Is this happening?
Oh my God.
I remember being amazed by so many things. And I, I also remember, going to buy the fruits and veggies at the
Mm-hmm.
Fruttivendolo, and it was always this, like you say, with
Mm-hmm.
your experience, it's always the back and forth, and you get to know
Yeah.
the people, and then sometimes they give you a discount or you get a few extra
Yes.
tomatoes in your bag or
That's the
something.
best feeling. It's the best feeling because you
It
feel
is so
held.
cool.
You feel like then you have like you become like part of the community. And that's how I felt with Eugenio. And when I moved away from there, I felt like crap, where am I going to get my vegetables? Like, but I felt I love that I love that you felt that same way with your mom and going to these like the fish market, and then you went to the fruttivendolo, and you went. These are the types of things that a lot of places around the world we don't have that. Like we don't have a local butcher. We don't have like a local fruttivendolo because I'm in the middle of like a tundra sometimes, you know? So it's nice to have that
Yeah.
that community. And I think when I look back to even the first time I lived in Italy, which was in 2002, when I was a student, I was studying abroad. I remember just the avid the feeling that like I know if I go to this forno, this bakery, I'm gonna get a really good piece
Mm.
of bread or I'm gonna get a really good piece of pizza. Because do you remember we used to go when Julie and I taught at London School in Campo Marte in this neighborhood, after class, we would go to this forno that was always open, it seemed like for us, but I was like, we'd always find it open and we'd always get a really good piece of either a piece of pizza or a focaccia or what were those things called with like it was like a with cheese in the middle and then there's like maybe some prosciutto. I forget what they were called, but like they look it
The
was no, it wasn't a
schiacciata.
schiacciata, but it was like two pieces of bread on top and then something in the middle. It was like one of those like le torte salata, diciamo. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I don't know
What
what
was
that
that
is
called?
called. I'm like drawing a blank. But yeah, so I don't know. So the Mediterranean diet, and as I remember back as I studied abroad, okay, I think I might have told you this, but okay, I was 20 years old. I every meal, every dinner, we had three courses every dinner because we had an agreement with a
Yeah.
restaurant in Fiesole because that's where I studied, and we'd have a meal every single night. We had to be there, blah blah blah. So we would have a pasta or antipasto, a pasta, a piece of meat, some sort of piece of meat, potatoes or vegetable, sometimes a salad, and then always dessert. Okay, so Katie did gain weight because we had three-course meal. I mean, we tried everything. Every meal was different. And I just remember the variety of food, the variety of vegetables and things that I've never ever tasted. Where my taste buds like yours were blown like, what is this piece of meat? Why didn't it never taste like this when my mom made it? What are in these potatoes? Oh my goodness, they're delicious. Like something always blew my mind. And then I was like, the same thing with you. We found the calzone. The calzone was like something that me and the other students were like, shit, let's go down. We know the pizzeria. Let's go there. We're going to get a huge calzone with prosciutto and mozzarella and like everything inside. Of course, it fills you up like a freaking tank, but like it was like something we never tasted before, never ever had. Um, anyway, but the Mediterranean diet, people, is something that not necessarily is like having a three-course meal, right? I mean, it's like
Mm.
there's a hefty balance of the pasta, the vegetables, the fruit, which again is not always like just like something you have in the morning. It's something you have after a meal, which is a great way to digest.
Ah, yeah.
There's a lot of legumes, which is something that I did
Lots.
not I did not fathom that at this stage of my life that I am still obsessed with shishi, with chickpeas, guys. I am obsessed. It was something that when I lived there in when I was trying to make my life there from 2009 to 2013, chickpeas were basically my staple diet. Like and I literally would eat them every single day. Either I would, saute them a little olive oil and salt and pepper and just eat them, or I would add tuna to it,
Yeah.
or I would add a vegetable. I don't know. I would just eat because it was simple, it was cheap, and I was full. Like it was enough.
Yeah.
It was good,
Was
and
it
it's
good for
good.
you?
Yeah.
It, yeah. No, that's I would say legumes definitely a very big part of the Italian diet. And I think that's true
Mhm.
throughout Italy. You'll go to different regions and everybody has some form of a bean or a chickpea or
Yeah.
lentil
Hmm.
thing. And uh, on that note, just thinking about it, the amount of
Oh yeah.
soups as well. There's a lot of different types of soups, and many of them are
Hmm.
vegetable soups, like either a mixed veg or a bean soup or a legumes, some kind of legume soup. Um, and I remember eating more soups and more seasonal food than I
Yes,
ever had. So food is very
that
seasonal in the
definitely is.
Mediterranean diet for
Definitely.
sure.
Definitely. I remember going
Like,
when we
yeah.
visited we would go from living here and then visit in 2017 when we went back to visit for the first time after we moved here. I just remember always being like to my mother-in-law going like, okay, what do we like, what are the, because I could never remember what are the seasonal vegetables right now. Like in this moment, we visited in July, like what is the seasonal vegetable? Obviously at the grocery store you can find everything as you do here in the States,
Mm,
but at a fruttivendolo they would have only the seasonal vegetables. So she was um very much following the seasonal vegetable diet. So she would be like, "Well, why are you getting
yeah.
zucchini? It's not even in season." I'm like, "Well, we live in the States and it's always in season because we get it from Mexico." Like, so but that I remember that specifically when I lived in Italy too, and I would go to the fruttivendolo and there would be new vegetables out. Like, "Oh, what do I do with cabbage or what do I do with kale or what do I do with, you know?" And that's where you would search recipes and say, "Okay, I can make this and this," or so yeah, very much something completely different than I think the rest of the world, where you come from a world like the States or perhaps South Africa. If it's the same, I'm not sure. But if you go to the grocery store, a big box of grocery store, you're going to find every vegetable possibly you could
Yeah.
use from all over the world because everything's imported. But in Italy, if you go to your neighborhood fruttivendolo, your neighborhood butcher, your neighborhood, you'll find what's in season, what is something that was just picked the other day. So that I think again becomes something of community again. I don't know if you agree. Do you agree with that?
Mm,
Like, I don't know, like I feel
definitely.
like that becomes part of your daily life and you're like, okay, well, every week I'm going to go to my fruttivendolo and I'm going to find my vegetables and my, whatever's in season and whatever's fresh. And maybe I need some more fruit and he has some mandarini and I need some mandarin. So I'm going to get, there's, I always felt, I always felt a part of something. There was a sense of belonging when I lived there. And,
Yeah.
and what do you think about that? Do you feel like that is true most of in Italy, I feel like, right? Having to do with the diet.
I
Yeah.
would definitely. When we first moved here up north, I really struggled to fit in, and I struggled with the diet because it's very different to the Tuscan diet, and I just constantly had this fleeting kind of feeling. Um, but the more I try and ignore that and just focus on what is, the more I notice the similarities. And one of those is exactly that community and the eating what
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
seasonal. So since we've been here, we've gone through, the end of summer, autumn, and obviously now winter. And we've seen the mushrooms come and go. We've seen the cinghiale, the wild boar, come and go. And you can see it in the shop, in the little convenience store that we have here. They sell what is available. When the fruit guy comes, because he only comes on a
Yep.
Tuesday, and when he comes with his little truck, you see what's available. And you don't really know what you're going to get. So you go there and you're like, okay, he's probably going to have potatoes, onions, and garlic, and then the rest is whatever's
Hmm.
available. So sometimes you go and you find peppers, and then everybody in the village has bought peppers and they're doing things with peppers. Oh, and obviously
Oh,
chestnut
love
season,
chestnuts.
so when there's the
Oh,
chestnuts, and everybody's doing all the
yeah.
chestnut stuff, and there's a whole festival for it, and it brings the community together. So very much community driven, and people do like to eat
Hmm.
seasonally. It's something you look forward to. I look forward to when the castagna are ready. I look forward to when hunting season comes around and you can make the ragu with the wild boar, and it's just it's just so much
Mm-hmm.
connectedness that I think some of it has been lost over the generations in
Sure.
Italy. You know, as Italy has tried to modernize, a little bit of that has been lost, but not as much as other
Mm-hmm.
places. It's it's definitely still very much ingrained, and more people are trying to bring
Yeah.
that back. And that's part of reviving the villages, you know, like the South is doing by getting people to
Mm-hmm.
come there and open
Sure.
businesses. And you know, there's special like artisanal visas for people who do artisanal work, and they really try to bring that community back to it. And Yeah, the whole of
Yeah.
Italy, I think you could go anywhere in Italy and you will find an amazing experience with food that is particular to that village, not even just that region. Like that village will have a way of doing
Totally.
things that you just won't
Have
expect.
you noticed in your village? I know you're moving, but like in your village, are there specific like festivals or specific like things you've noticed that they focus on like each season? I know you haven't been there all seasons yet, but like is there things that like that?
Well, no, they definitely love their
Mm,
chestnuts. That's like a really big thing
okay.
around here. And polenta is a
Yes.
big thing. So
Okay.
there's lots of polenta around this time of year. But I didn't notice much. I mean, the wild boar is definitely a big thing, and they seem to really enjoy a lot of fresh
Okay.
veggies. So I think it's something coming up with the new spring, summertime. I'd like to actually get a good idea of what that's like. But for the time being, I've only seen the
Okay.
wild boar festivals and the chestnut
Uh-huh.
festivals, food wise. And it's not like a
Okay.
sagra like
Yeah.
we're used to in Tuscany. It's more of a festival,
Okay.
um, which is interesting. And they're also very
Mm-hmm.
simple. There's a lot of simple
Yeah.
dishes here,
Which is
is really
something I feel
nice.
like is all over Italy. There's a lot of simple dishes where when you
Yeah,
come and visit, you're amazed by something as simple as aglio olio and peperoncino, or like
yeah,
oro and
blow your
salvia,
mind.
butter and sage. Like those are simple dishes, but incredibly tasty and incredibly full of
Mm,
flavor. So yeah, simplicity. I feel like we could narrow down like the main things about the Mediterranean diet without naming like actual, recipes or anything is like from what I can gather with our conversation today, but also I'm sure there we can go on and on as we do when we talk. But simplicity, seasonal vegetables, pasta galore, and some sort of meat, fish, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's also something to be said about cheese, obviously, but I mean, I feel like those types of similarities kind of flew throughout this conversation of having some sort of meat as well. Good meat, obviously. That's why you go to your butcher.
mm, yeah.
You go to
You
your
go to your
butcher, you
butcher.
find some good meat.
It's I'd say vegetables are also a very big part of
Yes.
it. There's a very strong focus on
Mm-hmm.
fresh veggies, and always having some kind of vegetable on the
Yes.
table. I don't think you would easily go to someone's house and they just serve you a
Yeah.
starch and a meat. There'll always be some kind of vegetable, whether that's in the form of a salad or like green
Yeah.
beans or even just peas. There'll always be some kind of veg to go with
Mm-hmm.
what you have. And it's reflected in
Mm-hmm.
restaurants. Like when you go to trattoria
Yeah.
and osteria, you'll often see on the menu something called
Mm-hmm.
contorno, which means
Yeah.
a side. You know, so most, at least in South Africa and every other place I've been to, when you order a dish, you know, it comes with whatever veg they
Sure.
say it comes with,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
chips or
Uh-huh.
something like that. Whereas here in Italy, you choose what protein you want, you choose what
Yeah.
veg you want, you know, and they will always be very shocked if you don't order vegetables as well. They're like,
Yeah.
but you don't have your
Contorno? Eh?
vegetables. Yeah, you would have something.
Yeah.
Like, so I would say, yeah, absolutely right. It's fresh, quality ingredients, simplicity, and
Mm-hmm.
seasonal. I think those are
Yeah.
the main things I've also over the years have noticed about the diet. And perhaps in the next episode,
Mm-hmm.
if you're keen, we can maybe select a few dishes that really stood out for us and actually
Yeah.
discuss them, um, so that people know exactly what could they expect, and perhaps something they could try and order if they come and
Because
visit and try out one of your awesome
I
tours.
think that's a great idea because I think a lot of people when they visit, especially as a tourist, they go to dishes that they are that's similar to what they're maybe got at Olive Garden or got at
Mm,
an Italian restaurant in the States. Um, so yeah, understanding that aglio and peperoncino is a delicious dish, you just have to know what it is. Aglio is garlic, oil,
yeah,
and pepper flakes. That's it. It's just freaking simple. So that I
so,
mean that
so good.
understanding those types of things, especially when you're visiting, you want the people that I feel like that come for the actual immersement and then they want to be in with the culture and in with the people. You have to taste those traditional dishes of the area you're in.
Yeah,
If it's in northern Italy, it's in southern Italy, it's in Tuscany, whatever town you're in. Like you said before, Julia, like every town has probably a specific, definitely has a specific dish that they're famous for, or with chestnuts, or with cinghiale, or with bacala, or whatever it might be.
exactly.
I was going with something with this. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. Um, because I was thinking about food. I'm like, oh my god. But just like I was gonna compare the fact just that like with different varieties of grapes and wine, like we talked about last time, there's also different quality and different types of vegetables that every region is famous for. Maybe not as famous
Yeah.
as like you would know, but like for example, and I'm just gonna bring up this piece of fruit because I remember finding it this past summer and I freaking freaked out at the fruttivendolo in my town. Okay, so the peaches, the tabacca, the ones that are round and flat. You know what? You know
Yeah,
that peach.
yeah.
People, I will figure out the name of this in English, but this peach,
I'm pretty sure they're just called
yes,
flat
there's something. Yeah,
peaches
I
in
think they're
English.
probably. I think that's what the fruttivendolo at my market said. But I freaked out at her. I'm like, "Are you effing kidding me? Where did you get these? Did you make these? Did you create them? Like how I've only seen them in Italy. I bought like so many. I swear I freaked out. And they're so good. This is like I remember it was 2007 I was introduced to this peach and I will always remember the first taste of this peach. And there's only a certain season you can get this peach in Tuscany. And I don't know if they're all over Italy. I
Mm.
have no idea. But if I ever see it, I'm like, give it to me. Like, I love this peach. It's so good. Um, but yeah, so I think that's a great idea. I think the next episode we should pick a couple dishes, couple three, four, I don't know, dishes we can discuss. Some that we might see at a touristy restaurant or at a restaurant that maybe if you're not going to touristy restaurant, which I hope you're not, but if you are, it's okay. But some dish that's specific to the region that you've
Mm.
never tasted before. Because that's where we grow and that's where we learn when we taste things that are like not in our diet. Like I've never tasted aglio and
Exactly.
peperoncino. I've never tasted the pasta with cinghiale. What is it called? Papa cinghiale. Pappardelle
Pappardelle.
con cinghiale. Thank you. Like it's
Oh my
so
God,
good.
it's
And
so
it
good.
doesn't matter if you don't like, okay, this is what happened in my past this last retreat. I remember introducing them. I forget what meat it was. It was either rabbit or pheasant. I forget. But I'm like, you have to just try it. Just try it. If you don't
You
like it,
have to.
fine, but just try it because you'll be amazed on what a dish, even though you know it's a rabbit or you know it's chicken livers, like the fegatino, try it. You'll be surprised because as much as like I've tasted things like I've tasted octopus. I haven't tasted sea urchin yet. That's next on my list. But like, because Stefano loves sea urchin, he loves it. Yeah. Okay, so
Oh,
you do not.
no, not for
You do
me.
not. But I would try it just to try it, just to
But
try
you
it.
gotta try it. You
Try
gotta
it for
try it for
yourself and
yourself. Yeah.
see if you know entices something in you. There's a taste buds that envelop it, and you're like, ah, my God, I need to have more of this. Like, that's how I feel with mussels. I don't know about you. What's your dish? What's your dish where if you see it on the menu, or you decide you like, I have to freaking make this because I'm craving it. What is that dish for you?
Oh, I actually couldn't narrow it
I know.
down,
I
to
was
be
gonna say,
honest.
as I said that, I'm
There's,
like, what am I gonna say to her? Because I could say mussels, but
yeah,
there's a
like
lot of other things.
I don't know. What I do remember you having um a strong like towards
Oh
tartufo.
God. Yes.
And tartufo was one of those things that I don't
Mm,
like. And I remember that if it was
mm,
on the menu, like
yeah.
spaghetti with
Yeah.
tartufo sandwich, that's what
Do
I'm
you
having.
do
I
you
do
remember
remember.
when we went to Luca and Leo's, their panino shop? And I'd always
Yes,
get the panino
yes.
with there was prosciutto, or no, I was like into speck at that time, which is like a type of prosciutto, those of you don't know. And I would
Mm.
always have them put like the spread of tartufo on and you're just like, get away
Yes.
from me. Like, and Stefano is the same. He hates tartufo. He hates it. He hates the smell of it. So when I would come home from having those panini at Luca and Leo's, he's like, he could smell it as he walks. He's like, did you have tartufo today? Oh, I guess I did. It was so good. It was so yummy. But yeah, I agree. Like, it's hard to narrow down. But I just, yeah.
It, it it really is. But if I learn, I think it's more that I would probably go to restaurants that I
Mm-hmm.
remember, and there's certain dishes at specific places that I
Mm-hmm.
really love. Like this one osteria in Florence. It's just off of Piazza
Mm.
Signoria. They make this tortelloni, this massive filled pasta that's got potato with this rosé
Oh,
sauce. And if they've got it on the menu, I always order it because they make it so
oh.
well. It's just so delicious. And yeah, the satisfaction that you get from eating it is not just
Mm-hmm.
I'm full, it's like my
Oh
soul is
yeah.
nourished, my desire for something fancy is nourished, my desire to feel nostalgic is nourished. It's all of that combined into this one
Oh
amazing dish.
yes. That
So
sounds amazing.
I kind of think maybe we need to travel around Italy and talk about dishes at specific
I'm
places.
signed
I
up
think
for
that's
that. Let's do that.
let's do that.
Yes, we're gonna do that. That sounds amazing. Because I haven't been to every region. I don't know about you. I think I've only been to one, two, three, four regions. But like not specifically, trying every dish, but
Mm,
that's probably, yeah, four. Lombardia, Emilia Romagna. Wait, is Bologna in Emilia Romagna? Yes. Bologna, yeah.
yeah.
Tuscany and Puglia. Umbria. No, sorry, five. Okay.
Wow, nice.
And Ancona,
Been
where's Ancona? Is Ancona in Marche? Or is that Tuscany? No, Le Marche. I don't know. I've been to Ancona
is
too.
it in the market? I can't
Yeah, so
remember.
I don't know. Anyway, that's another conversation.
That's
So this is lovely. I glad I got to know more about your childhood, because I never knew about that part of your life living with your grandparents, because I knew about your mother because we talked about that before. But
yeah.
yeah, I hope this was entertaining for you guys and understanding the Mediterranean diet. Again, we didn't really specifically talk about specific foods, especially, I mean, we talked about vegetables and legumes and meat and stuff, but I think it's more like you got to understand what you like, and also what yeah, what I don't know what I'm going with this, but we're not trying to like, say this is the only diet you should have and this is the best, but it is something that is very simple, very easy to follow, and it doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
complicated. I feel like a lot of people think Italian recipes are very complicated, but I think it's more the Italian American recipes are complicated because we add so much other crap to the recipes. It's possible to follow a simple Mediterranean diet anywhere you live. I am one to say that, and I know you did the same probably when you lived in South Africa. So yeah, Giulia, thanks for being here again. On our next episode, as we discussed, we'll bring up some pasta dishes, meat dishes, I don't know, any type of dish that we think is interesting to try on your next visit to Italy, right? That's a good idea.
Yes, I think that's a fantastic idea. I will certainly try and choose like a first, a main, do like one of
Yeah, I
each.
think that's a great idea.
Um,
Because I
yeah,
feel like
because this has been
if you
exciting.
are visiting Italy, you do need to get that 3-course meal at least once. It doesn't have to be,
Oh, for sure.
what I had was like a 4-course, which I had antipasto, a pasta, a meat, and a side, and then a dessert. But you can have either or. Like that's, we won't go crazy. All right.
Yeah.
Community, Florence and me community. Buongiorno, buonasera, buonanotte, wherever you are, and thank you for listening. And we will talk to you next time. Any questions? You know where to go. And ciao, ciao.
Yeah. Ciao, ciao.
I am beyond grateful for you listening to my podcast right now. I am so excited to share my journey of living abroad and all of my stories of Florence and Italy and all the places in between that I've visited. If this has reached you in any way and you would like to continue, please subscribe now. Also, go check out my website, trulyitaly.tours, for all my travel experiences. Ci si vede. Ciao.